We want to thank everybody for coming today. We're excited to go over what we're looking at. My name is Justin Cook. I'm going to be your host for today. I'm here with Alex Orr, our Vice President of Sales. Today we're going to be discussing Built for Gymnasium. It's going to be our 301. I don't know how many people were there for our 201, but we're going to kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive into this to make sure that we can get a good understanding of what we're looking at. So at first we're going to kind of discuss, and Al's going to go over what we're looking at and what we went over in our 201 webinar. Take it away, Al.
Thanks again, Justin. I appreciate the introduction. So as he kind of alluded to, we had what I would consider a 201 type of presentation last time. This one's going to be a little bit different. We are going to take a look at some different criteria, but we will review quickly what we looked at in the 201 session. So I'll quickly review that. So we did go through talking about how it is a seasonal business, and when we begin to push in October and November, that's because we are wanting to do installations in December and early January. Actually, before I get too far, I did want to remind you really quick to please use the chat window for answering any questions, and then as we go through at the end, we'll actually take a moment, the last couple minutes here to answer those questions. So just to reiterate, when we start to push in October, November was when our 201 webinar was on gymnasiums. That's because we are loading up for the December, early January, Christmas or winter break installations. So at schools, high schools, middle schools, etc., those particular gymnasiums, we're actually pushing a few months prior so that way we can be prepared with material on site and get ready for those installations over those break periods, because schools, the athletics have become a main staple in the school community, and getting in there to do these installations and so on outside of the break periods is nearly impossible. So as we move into the springtime, the April-May push is because we want to do the June, July, August summer break when there aren't athletics going on in those gyms. So when you start seeing us push gymnasiums as we do this webinar, this is the time where you really want to hit those gyms hard. And frankly, we might even be a month behind. And for those of you that were at Light Fair, we'll kind of review some of our pictures that we had there that are ideal for gymnasium applications as well. So I also wanted to talk about focusing on relationships. And again, this is just kind of all in review. But just as an example, Peter Bassam Associates, who is specifying architect and engineering firm on the east side of Michigan, they have specified our product in nearly every gymnasium application they do. There are alternates, of course, but they've become so comfortable with using our fixtures in those applications that we are their go-to, and that is what you want. You want to get in touch with these specifying architects and engineering firms to the point where, if you got to send them samples or what have you, or if you would like us to touch base with them, we'd certainly be willing to do so. It's just getting our name on that RFQ as a front runner that's going to help solidify that business. And again, that was just kind of something in review of what we did in the 201 in November.
I mean, that sounds really great, kind of getting an idea. We really appreciate kind of touching on getting those relationships worked out and what we're able to do. And then I know there was kind of a focus a little bit too on, not getting into the weeds as much as we're going to in this 301, but looking particularly at the fixture selection and what we should do on that.
Sure. So in terms of fixtures, we have three core product groups that we were going to touch on today. Two of them actually belong in the high lumen category, so that would be our HL15B, which for those of you again that were at Light Fair, that was actually our branded unit. So that's actually going to become our HL15B as in branded. That's going to be our new die-cast heat sink that's going to have the EverLast branding inside of the heat sink actually. And then subsequently, again, the higher lumen package even beyond that is going to be part of our HL series that's available in the 3, 4, 500 watt and up to the 65,000 lumen package. And then our last category, which would be the ACE. That is the indirect fixture that we've been promoting for a few years. We're actually finally geared up and ready to launch that thing. We had a ton of traction last year, Light Fair. We had a ton of traction this year, and we kind of spun off some new elements that made this fixture even more exciting yet. And then another thing that kind of part of the new elements for that fixture specifically is just kind of an accessory that we were able to come up with before Light Fair that's going to help people going to help our partners push some of their customers over the edge and get them to lock these deals in. And that'll be kind of in our focusing in our accessories section of this presentation.
Well, and absolutely, I think the idea, we're looking at this and we're saying, there's reasons for doing it. We have our seasonal business that we need to look at with that, and then we have, the importance of the relationship, and then looking in particular that we got for the fixture selection. But I think it always goes back to, we're doing our 301, we're doing a little, 6 months after we did our 201, I think trying to figure out why. Why gymnasiums? Why are we looking at that?
So there's a few reasons why, in particular, that we talk about gymnasiums, and they've kind of become a bread and butter rather for us. And a lot of it in particular is, again, those architects and engineering firms, but a lot of it's because schools talk. I mean, these are all high visibility projects that there's a ton of patrons, there's a ton of fans, there's parents, there's other people from other districts. And these people are all going into a gymnasium. Now, Justin, you were an athlete in school, I believe, and you know that when you walk into a gym and it's underlit, that's the first thing you think about. And when it's well lit and the floor looks nice and it looks like an optimal playing surface, that's also the first thing you think about. So I think that in some of these districts, you're actually seeing some kind of contagious movement where one district is doing it, and you see the same thing on exterior sports lighting, right?
Absolutely.
Some of these football fields are, one in one conference, they'll do one field, and then next thing you know, it kind of springboards into several other fields in the same conference, which is kind of cool. It's great for us, it's great for you,
yep. And
it makes for a more visible project, and it makes for entire conference-wide installations, if you will.
So we get that, especially with the visibility, and they have the athletes who go in there and everything as well. I know there's an importance on the amount of gyms, and we touched on this, I believe, in the 201 section, which was really the amount of gyms that are out there and the availability of this. And we have a lot of our agents and that go out there and they work in warehousing and they do manufacturing, but the availability of gyms that are out there, it looks like 37,000. That's enormous.
It is, and part of the reason why we want to tackle as many of those as possible is because these are they're easy jobs that are very predictable that you can get in and out of. And what I mean by that is they're not very complex. They rarely involve controls. So this isn't going to be something where you're going to go in and there's going to be some elaborate Dolly or Dolly 2.0 control program or protocol that they're going to want to use, or a Zigbee stack that they want to introduce. They're going to want to. These are mostly high school or a low-level collegiate gymnasiums that we're talking about here, and we're looking to address. Of course, you get into your Little Caesars Arena and Mercedes-Benz Stadium and things like that, where these aren't the types of gymnasiums or stadiums we're talking about. Those are different types of venues. In some of these smaller high school, middle school, or collegiate level gymnasiums, the controls are almost non-existent. And I'm not saying that they're not necessary. I'm just saying, for the most part, the level of complexity of controls that they're looking to introduce is very low. And with that, I kind of say predictable and in and out. Those two words, or those two kind of points there, are important because we do a lot of businesses, you guys all know, that in the heavy industrial sector, and those are far more complex. They're way less predictable, and you don't just get in there, do the job, and get out. They're far more hazardous. The power isn't always clean. They're typically 480 volts, and there's a plethora of different mounting solutions and different things that you have to be in tune with in order to make that stuff work. And in the gymnasiums, it's not necessarily like that. You have very clean power sources that you don't have power fluctuations and things like that in. The schools are full of electronics, and our lights are no exception. These are non-hazardous environments. They're not wet. They're not dusty. They're not dirty of any sort. So these are very clean in and out applications that are super safe. that you're less likely to get calls back on.
Sure. So, and I think the word you said right at the end there is safe. It's not this idea of, the safety factor. Of course, there's a safety nature to any of this, but it sounds more and more that the safety of being able to go in there and have the ease and, like you said, the predictability and in and out of it as well too. So, that's a pretty exciting idea just from the perspective of people who have been in that heavy industrial area and being able to kind of take a little bit of not have as much of an issue with going into those facilities.
Right, and the design work that goes into these things is pretty minimally invasive, if you will. You're talking a couple lighting layouts, some fixture selections. Obviously, generally speaking, your higher mounting heights are going to require your higher lumen packages up into that 500 watt range and that 65,000 lumen. And then you got your standard stuff that's going to be in the 400 watt metal halide replacement range. That's going to be closer to your 150 or your 200 watt platforms.
Sure.
These are in and out, quick turnaround projects.
Perfect. Well, so and kind of getting an idea of, hey, this is why we're doing it. This is why we're focusing on gyms again, and not really staying, really kind of getting an idea and getting into the weeds here. It's kind of say, okay, this is what our focus is. Today's focus is going to be on a few things. First off, we're going to actually focus on the EverLast preparation and what we do and how we're successful in that. And then look at our fixture designs and what we do in that area. And then different applications that we've been into. We'll do a deep dive into that as well and be able to see, okay, this is where we've gone. This might be areas that you can bring a customer into that might be available there. Look at selling ideas and stickers. We'll keep that until the end. We'll kind of get into that area. And then kind of clean everything up and look at the odds and ends and what else is out there and what we can do to help you out as well. So really our first focus is looking at the EverLast preparation. And what we do, that's different from others that kind of gets you to that point. So kind of give us an idea of what we're looking at and what we're able to do and, how do we get prepared for this?
I do want to really quickly point out that all these images in the background, including the Avon Lakehold Farms and the rest of them that have been in the background of this presentation thus far, are all actual installation images that we've done and taken ourselves or have been provided by customers, and they're great. They're high quality images that are available to you for your use, which is kind of the prepared to close the deal section there on the right hand side. So that's kind of more about our marketing material and what we're able to provide to you. So any of these projects that you'd like to do, and we have a ton of case studies on schools and gymnasiums specifically, that stuff is all available to you. If you ever run into one of these school projects, which you should be doing now, this material is all supplemental material that will help your customer understand that this is the right decision for them to make now. And if there is something that we don't have that pertains to gymnasiums that you'd like in terms of marketing material and availability, we certainly would be able to provide that for you. We would create something for you, something to help ease the sale. Now on the inventory side of things, the inventory management portion of being prepared for what I would call a quote-unquote school season, which again is that push in October, November for the December, early January installs, and then the April, May timeframe or now for the summer break installs, is we actually gear up on our polycarbonate 22-inch reflectors, our 16-inch polycarbonate reflectors, even our other reflectors that are inherently used in those gymnasium applications, and then probably most importantly is our bird cage and wire guard selections. So in the past, we have struggled a little bit in terms of kind of nailing down when this school season actually is, because we had some fluctuations before. But ever since we've kind of put an emphasis on promoting these things as a seasonal portion of our business, it's helped us manage inventory much more effectively.
Well, again, and it goes back to, one of the things that when you kind of talked about it, in a few of these areas, prepared to close the deal and being able to have that marketing material, be able to use that, I think allows for, it goes back to what we discussed in that 201 section, which is the relationship. And being able to have that relationship and grow that relationship, which I think is important in having those materials as well.
Absolutely. And we partner with those architecture and engineering firms to ensure that we're getting accurate information, whether it be rebate information or existing lighting platform stuff, or if they have controls and things like that. But again, we use all that information to our advantage to ensure that we're providing someone a case study that is accurate has great photography or videography in some of those instances, and we use that as supplemental marketing material moving forward for all of our manufacturers reps to use as they go to close down these school jobs.
Perfect. Well, and I know when you said it was inventory management, you touched on really our next section of what we're going to look at, and talking about bird cages and different areas like that. So, it's looking at the fixture designs. We looked at, in that 201, we looked at the fixture selections, and now it's looking at the designs of everything and what we're really able to do. So, I know kind of our first one, and the one that I see, and I know that's something that you see as well, is that goes into high school gyms, is our HL15D fixture. So kind of give us an idea on what we got there and how that helps and what designs we can go from there.
So your 100-watt selection there on the top is going to be your 16,000 roughly lumen package, and then all the way up to almost 40,000 lumens. Now that 100-watter is actually going to be used primarily above your bleacher sections, but this can be kind of challenging because you got to remember that even though there are bleachers there and during game time there will be people in those bleachers that you don't want to be blasting with light, remember that ordinarily those bleachers actually are going to be retracted and that gym is going to be used for practice. So we find that most times, unless it's like a natatorium, which I'll kind of talk about a little later, most times where I originally had thought and planned that you'd want to use the lower wattage solutions, maybe with a 16-inch acrylic reflector on those side areas, a lot of the architects and engineering firms are actually electing to use that 150 or 200 watt platform across the board because of that retraction piece. Now, they have to be well lit during their practices, and I think they just kind of take the idea and stance that people, if it's a little bit too bright in the stands directly underneath those fixtures, they're just going to have to kind of deal with it for an hour or two of the event, rather than have kind of a different wattage selection throughout.
Sure.
Now again, that's just the typical. That's not always the case. People do sometimes elect to use those lower wattages on the outside edges, just to ensure that people aren't getting blinded or blasted with light up there in the upper seats, if you will. As we kind of make our way down to the reflector section here. So on the right we have the AL22 and the WG22, and then on the left we have the AC16 or 22, and then the PC16 or 22. Obviously the AC meaning acrylic, and then the PC meaning polycarbonate. On the polycarbonate side, that does have impact modifier in it, so it is going to be more impact resistant. Now, there's been a lot of people in the past that have paired that with the WG22. Now, in certain instances, you maybe talk about volleyball or tennis or something like that, that combination does work. If you're talking about basketball, hockey, baseball practices, softball practices, that type of thing going on indoor, you're not going to want to use any acrylic or polycarbonate offering unless you have the bird cage option with the bottom wire guard. Because even with the impact modifiers in that polycarbonate material, it's not robust enough to take an impact from a highly, an object that has a high velocity moving towards it. In those areas where they're concerned about uplight, which I would say is almost all gymnasiums, that acrylic or polycarbonate paired with the bird cage and the bottom wire guard are going to be your primary selection. In the areas where downlighting is of utmost concern, obviously you can use that AL22 paired with the WG22. Now, the only real reason why you need that bottom wire guard is just because of that glass piece that covers the optics, or excuse me, not the optics, but the chips themselves. Even though that has a high impact resistance, it's excuse me, still a good idea to protect that as best as possible.
So when you say, one of the things that kind of stood out to me and something that I find is important, I know you do as well, it's kind of dig into a little bit. You talk about the uplight within a gym, and you talk about the importance of that. So why is that so important to have uplight in a gym if people are playing on the court?
So uplighting gives kind of a general feel of more open space, especially since primarily almost all gymnasiums across the board have white or highly reflective ceilings. And then again, you have, generally speaking, polished surfaces. that you are bouncing the light back off of the floor. So you have really good down lighting, probably in the 80th percentile or more, pointing downward, and you have probably 20% or less going upward. But you do, because you are shining the light down off of a very reflective surface, you do have a lot of that bouncing back up onto that white ceiling. And that just kind of helps opens up the space, gives it a nice clean appearance, and kind of gives a feeling of good general overall lighting and very high levels of uniformity.
Sure. It sounds like, I mean, in general, the AL22 might work in certain circumstances, but you sometimes might get the cave effect, where you're not getting the light bouncing off the ceiling. So getting that acrylic or polycarbonate or whatever you need with that bird cage sounds like it might be the best option available.
Yep, I agree.
Perfect. Okay. Well, we have our HL15D, which we go to that 240 watt, but I know we can go even higher than that. We can get up to the 3, 4, and 500 watt as well. So give us an idea, why would it be important to go to that 4 and 500 watt in a facility? I mean, why go that high?
Generally speaking, these tend to be much more of a collegiate level product, and because primarily those gymnasiums are used for something, they're used for something different. They have much higher bleachers, things like that. They're a bigger venue, generally speaking, so they have their lighting mounted at a much higher rate. Now, there are high school gymnasiums that have ordered the 3, 4, 500 watt units, absolutely, but primarily the HL series would be more of a collegiate level, or in those applications where high lumen output, very, very high foot candles, even maybe above the IES recommendations would be required.
Sure. Absolutely.
And then again, same type of accessories with the bird cages and wire guards available for that.
So being able to have the acrylic and have the bird cage and just having those options as needed. Perfect. Well, so I know you kind of brought it up at the beginning, and it's something that we've been doing for a couple of years and getting out there is our inverted sports fixture. So touch on that. Touch on why why is this something that's pretty cool to have coming out to the market?
So the eighth is pretty cool. For those of you that went to Light Fair, I know that a lot of our manufacturers reps did. This is an inverted fixture, which is kind of unlike most in the industry. This would generally be used for the either inflatable structures or just those general structures that require strict uplighting. And that would be stuff that is tennis related, pickleball, any sort of volleyball, things like that, wrestling even. We've done model wrestling facility in University of Michigan, and that was all uplighting. It was required because you can't, in sports where you're constantly looking up, you can't have light fixtures that are pointing they're glare inducing things pointing down directly into the direct vision of the athletes. So these would be strictly used for those applications. The one at Light Fair that we exhibited was a flat wire guard. That is probably going to be good for most applications. This particular tapered wire guard, the image that we're showing here today, that one is going to be used for applications where you might have a smaller ball, say a tennis ball or something like that. You might be concerned about actually getting stuck on that flat wire guard.
Perfect. So you touched on it. You said, okay, the pictures that we have behind everything is based on applications that we've done in the past, and so give us an idea. I mean, looking at our different applications that we've gone into, I know one of our bigger ones, kind of dealing with this in lighting gyms and getting into that area is high schools. I mean, we've done a lot in those high school capacities. So, one of the areas that we have in marketing materials for our reps, I know, is our case studies, and one of them in particular is the Olivet School. So give us an idea, kind of touch on the Olivet and what we did there.
So Olivet was kind of cool. It was a great local installation for us, not too far from home. And again, this was kind of one of those applications where it was a pretty straightforward in and out solution. We got in at the distributor level, went from foot candles to, from around, I think in the 30s to, I believe like 55 to 60 foot candles, which is a pretty impressive increase, and also cut their wattage at least in half. They did elect to go with, I don't know if they used a wire guard or not on this particular application. They might have went with nothing at all, because it's primarily used for a volleyball, basketball type of gym. But again, they were very impressed with the outcome, and we ended up with a very happy customer. Now, I'd be kind of remiss to say on that last slide you had there, if I didn't mention some of those other applications that we've done really well in. And one of them that kind of comes to mind is that Loyola Chicago practice gym. I kind of made a joke before a couple of years ago that Michigan and Loyola were actually playing each other in the NCAA basketball tournament, and just so happened that we had done both of their practice facilities. So while a lot of people were giving, Mother Jean, I think her name was.
I think it was Mother Jean.
Sister Jean.
Not Mother Jean.
Sister Jean, giving her a ton of credit. I actually take a ton of the credit myself because we had lit both of those basketballs.
Sure.
You got to give credit where credit's due.
And it has to go to Alex on that one for Loyola doing so great.
That's right.
And that's fantastic. We can put a focus. We have our gyms that we're able to go into. We saw with the high school. We're able to go into college facilities, practice areas that we're able to get into and like those as well. But of course, there's other areas we can get into. And I know one of them you brought up was an auditorium area, and then even workout facilities that we're able to get into.
So the natatoriums are kind of interesting because those are generally indirect. Now, if they're not indirect, a lot of times we see those ending up with bottom reflectors or bottom lenses, I would say, because again, you got swimmers that are doing different strokes and things like that, and if they're doing the backstroke, let's say, again, glare is a concern, but we do have lens options, bottom lens options, and actual diode level lenses that we can use to kind of mitigate some of that glare. One pool that actually comes to mind here is one down in Ohio where we actually used the cone optic on there to help kind of evenly and create better uniformity by the bleachers and also reduce the glare overhead. So that was a pretty cool. And again, in the natatorium, I would say that 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to end up with an indirect solution, and the ACE would be ideal for that, and a wire guard isn't necessary. Now, I do want to mention something about natatoriums. The question constantly comes up, and I got a question here actually about natatorium rating, is that someone had written in, can you explain if your fixtures are natatorium listed or not? Natatorium listing doesn't actually exist. There is no such thing, and I've mentioned this before, but I try to talk to new reps and things all the time. I know some of you are new, so I didn't want to mention that a natatorium listing does not exist, and because it doesn't exist, our fixtures are rated for that. We would never sell you something that we would believe that would have an issue in those spaces. There is chlorine in the air, but these are all safe levels of chlorine. I mean, people have to be in there and breathing, obviously. So our fixtures are not adversely affected by that.
Absolutely. So, and that was something I'm really glad you touched on, that natatorium rating, since it is something that just, like you said, doesn't exist. So, and I know, getting into the YMCA, getting into Planet Fitness, those type of areas, but especially that there's pools in there, but being able to look at places that we've gone into outside of schools and put those fixtures into, such as the YMCA, Planet Fitness, and then growing our business with Snap. It's pretty important, and my guess is there's areas around where maybe our reps can take customers into.
Yeah, absolutely, and we need to do a better job of this as well. I mean, we need to better promote our relationship with YMCA and Planet Fitness. I know that we had a year ago or so kind of done a promotion with YMCA where we had kind of sent out some good marketing materials for our reps to use as they approach different YMCAs nationwide. But a lot of you listening today know and have actually completed either YMCAs or Planet Fitnesses, and we are on their preferred vendor list. So feel free to approach them. Feel free to approach us. We're going to kind of fire that marketing bandwagon back up and get that train rolling so we can make sure we're providing you guys with the latest and greatest information as it pertains to those particular projects so that we can continue to kind of build momentum in those areas for sure.
Well, that sounds great. Being able to touch on that and look at our applications and how do those translate, we can talk all day until we're blue in the face, but how does this translate to our reps and what they're able to do? And it sounds like all of these with the marketing materials and what we're able to do really help that out as well. So,
and again, I mean, those are really good, safe in and out jobs too. Those Planet Fitnesses and those YMCAs are pretty minimally invasive. So
be able to get out of there as quickly as possible. So, I mean, tied in with that, you look at the selling ideas. Selling ideas, and when I say and stickers at that, and we'll kind of touch on that a little bit later. So as we're focused selling ideas, there's a few things that stand out to me. We have energy savings, we have ROI, and we have rebates. And you look at those, and it almost seems like they should be together. You have energy savings, which then turns into ROI because you get the rebates that's on there. And so, but how are they different? What makes them different? What makes them separate?
So energy savings, ROI, and rebates are pretty standard issue, right? Those are things that you sell almost every lighting job on. And I believe that those things are kind of in a category of their own, not individually, but all three of them together, as it relates to the aesthetics, the high quality photos, and the TV. Those are different selling points, and those are selling points that almost specifically apply to gymnasiums in different areas that we kind of reviewed today, different applications we reviewed today. So from an aesthetic standpoint, I kind of talked about how schools and boards and things like that of different districts get together and they talk about their improvements and their facility improvements and the bonds and things like that we're all seeing pass. And a lot of them have lighting packages involved. And that's almost strictly about aesthetics. And schools have always kind of been budget conscious, of course, but part of that budget conscious involves energy savings, but it also involves the aesthetics of the way that their schools appear. They're funded primarily based on the federal government giving them money per student. Now, athletics is a major part of allocating students and getting students to come to a certain school alongside academics, of course. But an aesthetically pleasing school with high-level athletic facilities that look great translate into job opportunities. All of those high quality photos that end up in the newspaper, or they end up in a magazine, or they end up on a website for a local news company or something like that, a media outlet of some sort, those all will look and appear so much better. We all remember the gyms that we went to in high school and played in that looked and had terrible lighting, right? But we also can recall all those ones that looked brand new, that felt really inviting, that you shot the lights out of the place in. And I mean, those were most of the gyms I went into. I'm not sure about you, Justin, but I was dealing with it. But again, and then the TV. TV, that's becoming a very popular part of high school athletics at this point. And even our local school districts around here, we have a local television company called JTV, and they actually go do live broadcasts. And they said that they can tell a drastic difference with their 4K camera recording equipment when a gym has adequate lighting in it or not. So important.
Absolutely. And one of the things that kind of connects that, you look at the better aesthetics and the high quality photos and TV is, it's interesting you talk about the difference, but it sounds like with ROI, you get a return on investment just on, not from a monetary standpoint, but you get students that come to the school because the athletics are better. You get the TV that comes into there. You get newspapers. You get different things because they like going into those facilities. So there's an ROI in that as well, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
So perfect. Well, kind of touching on that and looking at, I know we kind of holding off it a little bit and what we're able to do with our inverted sports fixture, looking at and stickers and connecting that with what we can do and what you guys can do when you go out there and sell this inverted sports fixture. So kind of, give us an idea. You're able to do some different things, whether it's focused on school spirit or maybe do ad space, and what they're able to do with that.
Depends on the application, Justin, but from a school spirit standpoint, in those maybe wrestling rooms and things like that, where you want to use the inverted eights, that would be a great opportunity to and promote the school spirit and things like that, or put the names of the wrestlers that are on the teams or something like that, or maybe the championships or something, or conference champion or division championships they've won in the years and that type of thing. Then you got your ad space. So those clubs, those pickleball courts, those volleyball courts, the tennis courts, things like that, where there's available ad space. There's a big blank canvas on the bottom of that fixture. And if those of you that went to Light Fair again, you saw our picture. We had a sticker on there. That would be ideal. I mean, you could sell a club or a school on selling that ad space because it's something that everyone would see. And in this inverted space, those stick out like a sore thumb, and that would be a very cool place to put an advertisement for a company.
Sure. So being able to, again, might go back to the ROI, being able to put those stickers up there and actually have that return on that as well. So, and having the focus and kind of doing the deep dive on this, of course, there's those odds and ends, those things that we need to cover and look at, and maybe look at fixtures and what we can do on that as well. So, kind of give us an idea of what we're looking at with some different odds and ends that are that are reps and we should look at?
All right, so we're getting close on our time here, so I'll make this quick and kind of wrap this up. This last section here is pretty important because these are all primarily things that are questions that come up during these gymnasium applications. So emergency battery backups. That is a very important piece of the puzzle. The emergency battery backups are available in either a 10 or a 20 watt platform. But where the major confusion comes with using these types of systems is how to wire them. So we obviously wire them here from the factory, but these are not designed or supposed to be used as night lights. You actually need an emergency switch leg to make these work properly. So that way, in the event of a power interruption, where you might have there's literally no power coming into the building, not operating on a switch where you turn the breaker off or you turn the light switch off. You don't want the fixture to come on in that scenario. You want it to come on when there's actually a full-on power outage. And I would say using an uplighter or bottom lens. I kind of touched on this earlier, where you have some of those applications where more uplighting is better. So that would be the cone or a bottom lens combination that you'd want to use there. Maybe even like a wide bay application in certain instances. The bird cage, not always necessary. So the bird cage would be necessary when you don't have netting. When you don't have netting, obviously the fixture is the first thing that is available for an impact from some flying object or something. So some of these facilities now have adopted this netting system where it actually hangs below the fixtures. So it would be ceiling, then fixture, then the netting, and then obviously the floor. So in those instances, you can pretty much use anything that you would like without worry of damaging the fixture in any way. And then something else that I wanted to kind of touch on, because this comes up very often because of the age of the T5 and the T8 linear fluorescence. So linear is not the end-all be-all in regards to what is already in these gymnasiums. Some gymnasiums have the 400 watt metal halides and look great, and that's great. But other ones have been retrofitted with the T8 and T5 platforms. If you go into one of those spaces and they're looking for a linear platform, you can use one. But I will say that it's not absolutely imperative that you match their existing aesthetic. A lot of gymnasiums nationwide really appreciate a round-looking platform because it just gives a little bit different feel than a linear platform fixture, and you don't have to do anything really funky with it to get that uplighting that those gymnasiums need in order to provide that open, nice uniformity across the board. So just remember that even if the customer has a linear fixture, that it is not imperative that you remain in the linear. If they want to use that, we obviously have offerings for that as well, but it is not the end-all be-all for gymnasium applications.
Absolutely. Well, and I really appreciate that and kind of digging in and looking at those. And so, kind of finally, it's questions. Are there any questions or anything that we can answer for you?
I see a couple here, Justin, but we are over our time by about 5 minutes or so. So we'll actually, we'll note these questions here. We'll take a quick screenshot and we will address those questions. Each manufacturer's, each regional representative inside here will actually address those questions. So I did want to say thanks again for joining us on our May Quick 30 as it relates to gymnasiums. And I appreciate you, Justin, for being our host today.
I appreciate you sitting here and talking with me. And again, stay tuned for another Quick 30 webinar. We look forward to continuing working with you guys. And thank you for all your hard work.